The 1920s were one of the most prosperous times in American history due to the economic boom that many people believed would never end. People got rich, and rich people got richer, in a time that came to be known as the Roaring Twenties. The greatest war of all time had ended. Alcohol was even more illicit than it ever had been. Flappers and slappers danced in their cocktail dresses, and cigar-chomping gangsters in pinstripe suits and fedoras roamed the streets with their fast cars and faster Tommy guns. The Great Gatsby eerily predicted the end of the fun with a horrible economic crash. For about 10 years, everything could only go up. Many major developments and things happened in the Roaring Twenties. Most notably, the end of World War I, about 2 years before the 20s actually properly began. The women's rights movement and the amendment to the Constitution allowing them to vote. Prohibition, possibly the largest thing in the 20s, that made drinking, alcohol, the consumption and sale of alcohol illegal. The rise of the gangster, such as Al Capone. Silent movies, which brought film to the masses for the first time in history. The developments in music, notably jazz, swing, and blues. The booming of the economy and the millionaires that it created. Such things as baseball and other entertainment that kept the masses happy. And finally, the crash of 1929, or Black Friday, as it is called, when it all came tumbling down. When World War I ended in 1918, America was by far the most unscathed by the war. Having only entered in 1917, the US was spared the devastation of the other major players such as Russia, England, and Germany. Adding to this, the US had been selling war material to all the other major players, allowing them to grow very, very rich off of this. The US public itself came out very well, seeing how they dipped into the reparations Germany was forced to pay and also were reaping the benefits of a stronger post-wartime economy that would carry the country until its inevitable crash in 1929. While many US citizens died in the war, many men returned home to their wives and families and children to start a new, more prosperous life in the economic boom time that followed the world's most horrible war. Another important development of the 1920s was the women's rights movement, also called the suffragette movement. Suffragette because women. Before 1920, women were not allowed to vote in the United States of America, and they did not have the same rights and responsibilities as a regular U.S. citizen. However, through much campaigning, there was finally an amendment that said that women could vote and had the same rights and responsibilities as any United States citizen. Possibly the most important thing that happened in the Roaring Twenties was Prohibition. Before 1920, there were huge pushes to try and ban the sale and consumption of alcohol, mostly by temperance unions and women's movements. After women finally got the vote in the 1920s, Prohibition shortly followed. It made the sale and manufacture and distribution of alcohol illegal, closing down many breweries and bars. To combat this, many people formed underground speakeasies where people could go and have a good drink and in secret. The police usually would raid these places, but they still remained secret nonetheless. Here, we can see a police raid on a speakeasy after someone comes to try and purchase some of the booze. Possibly the most prominent figures of the 1920s were the gangsters, men involved in the underground illicit trade such as drugs, prostitution, money laundering, racketeering, but most of all, prohibition. Men like Al Capone had speakeasies from New York to Chicago and from Chicago to LA, all serving the people with their liquor that they wanted. They lived fast, they carried Tommy guns, and they drove fast cars. They generally lived fast lives. Al Capone was probably the most famous of them. He was finally gotten in the 30s for tax evasion, but before that, he was the kingpin of Chicago. He basically ran the city. From his speakeasies, his money laundering, and his racketeering, he became one of the richest men in the country. At a time when everyone was getting rich, Al Capone just got richer. Another innovation of the 1920s was the silent movie finally becoming accessible to the masses. As shown here is a Charlie Chaplin movie, Charlie Chaplin being possibly the most famous silent movie star. This film is called The Police. Silent movies really bridged the gap with entertainment. Before that, people could only read books, read the newspaper, not much else. They might be able to go, I don't know, see a Nickelodeon for maybe a nickel, but it was never more than 5 minutes. With silent movies, you finally got full feature-length entertainment that the masses could appreciate. The 1920s also gave birth to many musical movements such as blues, jazz, and swing. The 1920s was a time of economic booming. So many new millionaires and people were just earning money left and right. The economy looked like it could never go down. Even key economists like Keynes never thought it would go down. People thought that it would just keep getting better and better and better and everything would be great. And it looked like that would happen because people just made a lot of money. People had enough money to buy things that they never did before. Cars became widespread. Movies made their money. Heck, even alcohol, which was made illegal, was still widely available because of all the money people were making. People didn't think it would ever go down. And unfortunately, in 1929, it did. It is said that all good things must come to an end, and on October 29th, 1929, it did. The Roaring Twenties finally came to an end, with the stock market crash that would thrust the world into the Great Depression. Years of spending money on borrowed money and buying stocks on money you didn't have finally caught up with America, and its time was over. The good, fun, expensive tastes of the 20s finally gave way to the frugality and poverty of the 1930s. It shows that nothing lasts forever, especially not good times.